It was media day at the Stanley Cup Finals. So let's head there right now and bring in Pierre, Lebrun, and Ryan Rishaug, who are both a part of it. Guys, all three of us have been at more Stanley Cup Finals than we could even care to count at this point. It's always controlled chaos. But right now, for the first time ever, Connor McDavid was there on display, surrounded by cameras and microphones. How would you describe it, Ryan? Controlled chaos? How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's kind of what you'd expect, guys. I mean, the NHL's biggest star on the NHL's biggest stage, just an absolute crush of cameras. I sort of went there early, waited 20 minutes, and just slowly everything filled in around me. And I looked around and realized, like, well, I'm not going to be able to get out of it. I was stuck. I was basically stuck for half an hour until the whole thing wrapped up. But, yeah, McDavid came out, talk about his sort of zen attitude that he's trying to take towards this, had a yoga hat on. But yeah, it was a lot, and that's what these players need to be prepared for. That's part of it. Pierre, the Florida Panthers know all about it. They were here. They've experienced it. This is not new for them, but it is for the Oilers, and so it's a different experience for each team here.
Yeah, and what I would say, Ryan, is that for guys like Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, they're a bit still used to this, even though they've never had media day at the Stanley Cup Final. They've had media day at All-Star games and other events where they have a big podium and a stage. What's interesting is I always see the reaction of third and fourth line players who show up to this thing. I have my own podium.
Yeah, my name bar. Derek Ryan had a name bar up there.
Yeah,
it was great.
And so there is some newness there. And a year ago, I remember that being the Florida Panthers saying, "Really? Like I have my own podium?" And this year, the Panthers a little more business-like because they've had this now 2 years in a row. Does that affect the outcome of Game 1? No, I don't think so. But at the end of the day, you could tell the difference between the Panthers having lived this 12 months ago and the Oilers doing this for the first time.
Gino, we're going to get to some of our favorite things that we heard today. But my favorite thing overall today was what we found out. Pierre Lebrun's article from The Athletic actually ended up being bulletin board material in an Edmonton Oiler meeting. I thought this was hysterical. So, Pierre, you do what you do, and you go talking to other people from other organizations saying, oh, what do you think? What do you think? Well, it was heavily in favor of the Florida Panthers for this series, and the Oilers got wind of that.
Well, I was curious. I went to Connor Brown to start with, and I said, did you, I said, I doubt you saw this piece. And he says, in fact, it was brought up in one of our team meetings where 17 coaches, 16 team executives, 33 people overall from across the league, 29-4 picked the Florida Panthers over the Oilers. And Chris Knobloch, according to several Oilers players, brought it up in a meeting. And you get it. It's a very natural motivation. I had a couple of Oilers players tell me, they were surprised. I mean, they just beat the Dallas Stars, a team that a lot of people had picked to win the Stanley Cup. And they were surprised that lopsided. And yes, there were a few Oilers players that told me, hey, bring it on. We look forward to proving people wrong.
No confirmation, Gino, if Pierre's face was on their video screen or not.
The screen wasn't big enough.
I'm sure your article was posted right beside Greg Cody's comment that McDavid is overrated. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure those things are side by side. Listen, as you get ready for the Stanley Cup Final, we're going to be talking lots about lineup changes and such. But everybody who's been there from a player standpoint says the same thing. Don't forget to enjoy the moment. Don't forget to take it all in. And that makes people somewhat reflective going in. They can't be reflective once they're in it, but they want to be reflective going in. And that happened with Leon Draisaitl today, right?
Yeah, definitely. It is an interesting day that way because, yes, we ask them about the matchup and stuff, but there's so much media there, and they do like 15 minutes at least. And, yeah, Draisaitl was asked about earlier on in his career, right? He and Connor McDavid came in. They were so young together, what they've learned. And he reflected a lot on how when they were 18 and 19, the weight of the world was on their shoulders. Everybody had all these expectations of them, and they didn't really know how, the right way. And they were running on instinct because they were such young players. If you look at their game now, guys, and the overall commitment to a better defensive game, being more competitive, understanding all the little nooks and crannies of their games and the way they can make a difference in a whole bunch of different ways, not just cheating for offense out the blue line. Their games have come a long way, and Draisaitl really reflected, Pierre, on the journey that those two have had together and the growth in their game.
Reminds me a lot, to be honest, of what we heard on Media Day 2 years ago when Nathan McKinnon was talking about the journey of the Avalanche and his frustration 12 months earlier from being knocked out again and cup or bust and the Avalanche of 22. Well, this is cup or bust, the Oilers 24. And again, this is not a media narrative. Ryan has lived it all year in Edmonton. McDavid and Draisaitl, after being knocked out by Vegas a year ago, referred to this season as a cup or bust moment in their careers. And part of that was the reality that this roster may change a lot over the next few years. That this was their window, that they had to figure it out this year. And give them credit. That's adding a layer of pressure on yourselves that no one else brought into the picture.
Not that I think we have to have this conversation now, but I always wondered, you guys, what's the bust part of that? Like, of course they want to win the Stanley Cup, but that's or what? What's the bust? But I know what you're going to say.
You know what I'm going to say.
Do you think that's not what they meant, though? Else?
No, but what it is, it's Leon Draisaitl has a year left on his deal. He's got a big decision to make this summer, and if the Oilers had lost in a second round to Vancouver, how different is Leon's decision?
But I don't think he meant that when he said cup or bust.
Right.
I don't think that he meant that's what the bust part was. But
the point is, this is their team in the here and now as we know it. It's the best team perhaps they're going to have during their era. This is their time.
Agreed.
Yeah. And what we're likely going to hear from them if they don't win the Cup this year is it doesn't matter how far we came. It doesn't matter that we both made our first Stanley Cup final. We didn't win. A lot like what we heard from Nathan MacKinnon before he won. Well, I can't use the language that he used because we'll get censored here. But they're making it very clear this is what they need to do to win. And the guy, if they do end up closing the deal, who would have guessed that Chris Knobloch would be the guy behind the bench making this happen? This is a guy who has been ballsy, I'll say it, ballsy with the number of changes he's made, and he's doing it again now. Now, out of nowhere, he's bringing Warren Foegele back into the lineup after he's been a healthy scratch for the tail end of the Western Conference. What is the thinking going behind making that change in the lineup right now?
I love YouTube, Gino, like the salty language. It's good. I love it, Gino. Warren Fogel's an interesting one because he was 20 goal scorer during the regular season. He came out late in that Dallas series. And that maybe speaks to the depth that the Oilers have right now. You can pull a 20 goal scorer out of your lineup and have enough good players. Basically what this means, Gino, is they don't feel they need a right shot center. Derek Ryan and Sam Carrick both come out. Warren Foegele draws back in. Adam Henrique was excellent in the face-off circle. A lot of the penalty kill face-offs that Carrick or Ryan would have been taking, I think they're going to entrust with Adam Henrique. He's a fast player. He's robust. He can score goals. I think this speaks to their depth, but it makes some sense to me that you would want Warren Foegele to start this series.
It underlines for me, too, that we have to stop, I think, with this narrative. Going into a Western Conference final, Dallas is deeper, Dallas is deeper. Listen, there's no question. The Dallas Stars are one of the deepest lineups in the NHL. And now we're hearing it again. The Panthers are deeper, and they may be. But in the meantime, each and every round, the Oilers are moving guys in and out of their lineup, guys that you figure are supposed to be everyday players because they have the kind of depth they have not had during this entire run under Draisaitl and McDavid.
And I think the telltale sign of that depth, Gino, is that it's not like they're bringing in players and you don't notice them. He's bringing in players, and those players are immediately contributing. So that tells you the quality of player waiting in the wings for the Oilers.
Ryan, remind me, because I can't remember for sure. There was one of the two of us that was insisting that Dallas was going to win last series because they were deeper, to quote Pierre Lebrun. Maybe a lot of conversation about deeper.
I never said they were going to win. I never called the Stars.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said they were the favorites because they were the deeper team. My mistake. We can go back and look at the tape and confirm that.
Pull the tape, Gino.
Speaking of interesting tape, Matthew Tkachuk comes out today and says, paraphrasing now, he's a gentler Matt. He plays between the whistles. No more of this face washing after the whistles. I don't believe him, personally. I'm interested in what you guys think of that. My question is Tkachuk saying that trying to convince himself, trying to convince his coach and teammates, or trying to convince the referees that, hey, no reason to throw up the whistle on me because I'm not going to get penalized?
I mean, does he believe it? Or does he just say, it's such a good question. Who knows, right? He's got great gamesmanship, and he has gamesmanship with the media, too. Yeah. I do think he does believe that this team is good enough that he doesn't need to muck around between the whistles trying to manufacture some energy or something that this team is going to be lacking.
He doesn't need to, but do you really think he's not going to want to?
Well, but I think you got to be careful, Gino. I think you almost need to sit back and wait and see what the refs are going to do. Like if you're Matthew Tkachuk and you start all that stuff and then you realize, oh man, the mandate in this series is to always take an extra guy, or the mandate in this series is for the refs to be all over the whistles, you're going to want to back off of that real fast. They have to be careful with this Oilers power play. They know it can swing this series. So I don't believe that there's none of that left in his game, but I believe, Pierre, he's more willing that if the games are close and the games are tight and his team is playing well, he's not going to feel the need to necessarily do that.
Yeah, I think there's some maturation there, but let's also point out that he got into Shesterkin's grill last round whenever he could and had something going on there.
Do that stuff.
But overall, the Panthers are very disciplined against the New York Rangers. No retribution on Trouba for that elbow. The Panthers have been pretty disciplined in these playoffs compared to in the regular season where they led the league in penalties. And that's huge. You know, I spoke to Nick Cousins about that. He's another one of those agitators. And he said, listen, we've talked all week about the Oilers power play and about the importance of us being disciplined. But, of course, we also talked about the fine line for Florida Panthers. They have a DNA. Their DNA is that they have a snarl. They're a team that gets in your face and gets under your skin. That's who they are. But how do you stay there without crossing that line and taking penalties? You know, players on both teams, I talked about this today with them, and the difference between 3 penalties a game for Florida in this final and 1 penalty a game could decide the series.
Oh, yeah.
Given the power of the Oilers' power play.
One last question, guys, and I want you guys to both jump in on this. It's not a prediction. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction for the series because both of you will probably say somebody in 7, so then that's completely irrelevant. Paul Maurice made the interesting comment today. He was joking about the fact that he took a team that 122 points, brought him down to 92 points. He goes, yeah, I've been brilliant. As much as he's being a wise guy about that, what he did take was a team that was 12th defensively to number 1 defensively in the NHL this year, now to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. Chris Knobloch, since he took over the Oilers, he elevated this team to number 5 defensively. There's 2 questions. Does this send a very clear message of what it takes to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs? And 2, what are you expecting from this series in terms, are we looking at 1-0, 2-1 wins throughout this series? Pierre, why don't you start and then Ryan jump in?
I think we'll have a few of those games. I also think we're going to have one of those strange games where everything goes wild and there's a lot of offense. You have to go back to Bill Zito making a coaching change after his team won the President's Trophy 2 years ago.
Yeah.
People were like, what? Because Bill Zito and his management group believe that being a high-octane offensive team in a regular season would not translate to winning when it mattered. Brings in Paul Maurice, who makes us a more balanced Florida Panthers team, defense first in the playoffs, despite having all the offensive acumen that you need to win. It's exactly what we've seen with the Oilers' transformation under Chris Knobloch. It starts in their own end, and the numbers prove it.
I think some of it depends on the refereeing, Gino. If the refs are giving out 3-4 power plays a game, I think we'll see some 3-4 5-goal games for sure from these teams. If the refs put their whistles away, and this is just straight up even strength, I think it could be tight, like we saw in a lot of those Dallas games. But it was interesting hearing the Panthers talk today, because normally you would think the conventional wisdom is when you're preparing for the Oilers, it's all about the power play and the offense and how you stop those guys. There is such a tremendous amount of respect from Florida to Edmonton about how good their defensive game actually is. This is not just about shutting down Edmonton's high-octane offense. This is about how to generate offense against a team that really is, Gino, to your point, very good defensively.
And as a final point from me, there are so many young teams in the league that are trying to bridge the gap to, we have all this talent, but we're trying to go here in the playoffs. These 2 teams have just given, and in different ways, but both these teams have just shown that if you commit to the right way to play the game on both sides of the puck, you can get here. Just like Colorado 2 years ago had that moment. It's fascinating to watch in front of your own eyes, because this is an Oilers team that was all offense a few years ago, and now it starts in their own end.
Both these teams figured it out. Offense wins during the regular season. Defense wins during the postseason, and that's all that really matters. Goals are going to come at a premium. Since the start of the conference final, Stu Skinner's got a .922 save percentage. Bobrovsky's got a .921 save percentage. It's going to be tough to score in this series. But you know what, guys? I love this. This is so much fun. Let's get to it. Game on. Thanks, Pierre.
All right.
Thanks,
Hey, you know that we don't cheer, and neither of us like predictions.
Nope.
But I will say we're in agreement on one thing. We're both picking with our hearts here. 4 games. Someone's sweeping.
Travel miles. Yeah. Limit the travel miles.
For a guy who's doing this from one city through the whole way, 7 games will be fine just by me.
Yeah. Shocking.
Says the guy at home.